Mike, how's it going?
Great, Frank. Good to see you.
Same here.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, doing well.
Anything fun and exciting happening in your life the last week since we met?
My freaking computer screen went out.
Oh, gosh.
Finally, yeah. Hey, I was talking to you about that earlier, which is funny because, we started talking about, certain principles and stuff. And, woke up to, because obviously here on, we do this podcast, we run all the systems right to my laptop here, and I got on there, and there's, these lines through it. And then I couldn't, and I'm like, oh, damn. So I get a little frustrated, and then I try to hook up the system, and I couldn't get it going. So I'm like, I call you up. I'm like, dude, I don't know if it's going to happen today, It's like, shit. And then I'm like, whatever, shit happens, right? And then all of a sudden, when I calmed down, it worked out. But then I was telling you, but it was funny because, I don't know if that's why it worked. It's not even... Because there's times where I've calmed down and stuff, it still didn't work out in the moment in which it needed to, but it worked out eventually. So, we were talking about this earlier today. Because we were talking about all the situation, and I get caught up in it too, and I think we all do, where we talk about things from different vantage points, and we always think our vantage point's better. And we don't know. We don't know. We just know our vantage point. What I do know from my vantage point when I'm dealing with things, when I'm calm or frustrated, I'd rather be calm. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work out quicker. I don't know that. Maybe the quantum physics is saying it does, but things do happen. It just knows it feels better as the process is going because, hey, just like a little kid in the park, you don't want the process necessarily to go quicker.
And I know what you mean, and I do the same thing with work, and I see myself do that, daily now when... if things aren't, quote unquote, going my way, or if I'm getting frustrated or if I'm getting stressed, I recognize that and I let go.
Yeah.
And I immediately, I'm like, hey, this process right here, this is not serving me.
Yeah.
It may not work out the way I want it, my ego intends for it to, but the stress, the feeling, I know that's not serving me. And so I kind of take a step back. And I know what you mean. It's like sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
But who am I to say that when it didn't work out that it didn't? Because there's so many other little factors that play into that.
It's true. And now, what I've noticed about myself, I have the ability to step back and consciously realize, okay, I'm getting frustrated. It's not that the system will, my computer won't be broken if I become unfrustrated. That's not the truth. The truth is, if I become unfrustrated, I could try every other avenue possible until the moment at which Best Buy opens up and I can bring it to the Geek Squad. It's like that's out of my hands after that. But
seriously.
But what I do know is I can control me getting out of the frustration quicker than in the past. Where the past I would have flung the thing outside and had to buy a whole new one. The Geek Squad would never even looked at it.
They would have never even gotten a chance.
So on that note, who are we talking about today?
Hey, we've got a great guest for you guys today.
Yeah.
We're going to be studying and going over Mr. Deepak Chopra.
Yeah, Chopra.
Chopra.
Yeah, Chopra.
Chopra.
I don't know. I've always heard Chopra, but it could be Chopra.
Hey, Chopra. At the end of the day, we're going over somebody who has been a major figure in the metaphysical, alternative medicine, well-being, type of teacher. Figure. He's also like a public figure too, and what I mean by that is he works with people in different pop culture, and I feel like this is a great person for us to go over and discuss today, simply because of the reach he has, publicly. And Frank and I are always talking about how more and more people are waking up to these concepts, understanding and remembering their true being, and I think that Deepak Chopra is a perfect example of us seeing that on a more mainstream level in our society today.
Yeah, and the reason is he has weight on both sides. When I say both sides, the physical world and in the spiritual world. And what I mean is he started traditionally out as in medicine, went to medical school in India, then made his way over to the United States, I believe. It was like 1970, and was up in the Massachusetts area. I forgot where he actually worked. Was it where yeah, we should know this, right? Yeah, so he it was up in New England, Memorial Hospital and stuff like that. So, I know he was at Boston University for a little bit, I think, and he taught there. So he was actually teaching in the medical field and actually working as a doctor in the traditional understanding how we see doctors. But then I think it was in 1985 is when he met Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who brought transcendental meditation to the United States, and then he went that way. So it's not like he abolished or disassociated from the medical field and science. He just married them, or a new way of looking at it is what he did. And that's why I believe he's as popular as he is, because a lot of people in the metaphysic world will, kind of like me, I'll study a little bit about science and biology, but I can never claim to actually be a scientist or a biologist, because I read a couple of books and listened to people where actually he went through the medical field just like every other doctor did, so he has a better footing on that to marry the both and talk about it. So he gains a lot of notoriety because of that. He's been on both sides, and he puts it together very well.
Yeah, I like the different aspects that he brings to the table. The fact that he's such a well-known author too. He's got a lot of books, guys.
Yeah.
So I mean, take a look at everything he's written. He's got a lot of good content online. He's got his YouTube channel. He's got multiple different videos, content that he uploads regularly. And so there's a lot of good information on him out there that you guys can kind of take advantage of and listen to. I think it's funny how a lot of the people we cover, or a few people that we've covered, have really gotten, I don't want to say their start, but a big push from Oprah Winfrey. And I thought it was kind of cool that he was on the Oprah Winfrey show too. I remember Eckhart Tolle, that was a big kind of takeoff moment for him. And we've gone over Eckhart Tolle, of course, on this show before.
Yeah, but even he was like, Wayne Dyer talked to him a lot.
Was he on Oprah? I would assume Wayne Dyer would be on
Wayne
Oprah.
Dyer was on Oprah, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So a few of the people
But
we've
even
covered.
before Oprah, they were already somewhat known.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just think
Oprah actually
really gives a huge platform.
Well, yeah, she created a huge platform is what she did. So it actually brought it to life, but
more and more mainstream and gives these people the notoriety, the following, that they deserve.
Yeah, Oprah attracted a huge audience, and then just add, I think today even she has this book club. Nice. So whenever she offers up her ideas on a book, the book goes freaking viral.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get her to read my book, but she won't.
Not yet. Very soon
kidding.
here. Very soon here.
We love Oprah.
No, but we're excited to speak about Deepak Chopra today.
Yeah.
Should you want to just kick us off with a video?
All
Should
right,
we jump right into it?
Yeah, I got this video I pulled up here. It's he kind of explains the metaphysic world and kind of understands it. So we'll start with this one.
The number one question in science today that scientists claim is the number one question is, what's the universe made of? And without going into details, because there's lots of details, relativity theory, quantum physics, what do you call it, general theory of relativity, special theory of relativity, all of that, the fundamental conclusion is that the universe is made of nothing. And that leads to and that's a scientific conclusion. The universe is made of nothing. But then the second question, open science, question in science today, the open question in science is, what is the biological basis of consciousness? Because if you didn't have consciousness, you wouldn't know that you exist, or that there is such a thing called the universe. So the two are related. And I think for those of you who are actually exploring consciousness, you will realize that consciousness is also made of nothing. So the universe is made of nothing, the consciousness is made of nothing, and if we agree on these two concepts, maybe then they're the same thing. Okay, that universe and consciousness are the same thing. Now, in the Eastern wisdom traditions, that is a kind of accepted fact. The word for consciousness is Brahman, universal consciousness. The word for the universe is Brahmand, the expression, the experience of consciousness as that. as this, as all this. So the hard problem actually doesn't exist for those of us who are explorers of consciousness, because there's no biological basis for consciousness. Biology itself is a construct and experience in consciousness. Okay? And the universe looks like what it looks like only to human beings. I bet you, if you asked a dog the nature of the galaxy or the Big Bang or dark matter, the dog wouldn't know. No other species would have this idea or construct that there's a universe. Okay, all the other species experience is experience. And that experience is unknown to us. I was recently, I'm writing a new book right now called Meta-Human, and I was reading about a species of insect that's similar to a butterfly called the painted lady. And I was totally captivated by the painted lady because she smells the world through her antenna. She tastes through her feet. Her wings are the instruments through which she hears. She has 30,000 lenses in her eyes that constantly shift, giving it presumably a kaleidoscopic, shimmering experience of colors, shapes, sounds, and experiences that are totally alien to us. Okay, what does the world look like to a snake that experiences infrared, or to a bat that knows the echo of ultrasound, or to a chameleon that experiences this world with eyes that swivel on two different axes? So this led me to the conclusion that there is no such thing as a universe. It led me to the conclusion that there is no such thing as a body. It also led me to the conclusion that there is no such thing as a mind.
What a way to start our day off.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting because that's what we're realizing. It is a construct. If we get lost in it, it seems real. Just like, and we understand.
When you say it, you mean our reality, right?
A reality, yeah, because it. And again, you go to a movie, you go to a play, you actually get caught up in it through the emotions in which the actors and the story is trying to draw out. So if you're watching a movie and you're laughing or you're crying, when you realize you're actually watching pixels straight ahead that are just brought upon by light and reflective that came from the projector behind it, but yet we're reacting to it. So the world we're living is nothing but pixels of photos and information coming in through light and lenses and reconstructed in our visual cortex in the back of our brain. And we're responding to it as if it was real, but then what is real? What is reality? And that's that's the interesting part. And he's saying, it doesn't really exist other than through the form of a conceptual understanding.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Well,
Yeah.
One of my biggest takeaways from that was how he was kind of explaining that, so everything that we experience is simply just an experience, okay? And then we, as kind of human beings living in this role, we take our experiences and we kind of tie them together mentally and create this narrative. And that's the narrative that we call the experience, or we call life, or
Yeah.
we call ourselves, or we call somebody else. It is not them. It is not us. It is not anything but experience. And so to take an experience and then create a story about it is what we are all doing and calling it reality. I find that fascinating because that's exactly what this experience is.
Yeah.
It's not this, it's not that, it's both, it's neither, it's all of the above.
Yeah, and I guess in part and parcel is to create a narrative in order to have the feel, the fun. Like, every sport created a narrative in order to play it. Football, I use this analogy all the time, but it started out by basing a field on 100 yards by 50 yards and create a narrative in order to play the game. Without the narrative, there is no game. But I guess where we get caught up in hostility is we don't think we can change the narrative. We don't think we could change the story, and that's where we can. And we start individually and then collectively it happens. But my narrative doesn't have to be the same as Mike's in order for me to survive on this planet. It really doesn't. And I think a lot of hostility people are generating is because they think there should only be one narrative.
Well, that's the reason media has such a stronghold on us and our society is it's hard for us to say that narrative is not right because that narrative is being broadcast and fed to millions and millions of us. And we all have something that's called this collective consciousness where, we feed off of, the ideas, experience of others, and that keeps this world, this reality spinning, if you will. And so you have these people who are like, okay, it's a recession, so everything must be, doom, gloom, depression, etc. I can't possibly fathom, finding success during a recession. That just doesn't happen. And this is a complete false narrative. In fact, during recessions create the most millionaires. This is proven. This is something we know. But it's what narrative you allow yourself to, attach to. If you feel like you need to hold on to the narrative of the collective consciousness, that which is being, broadcasted, you don't. You don't need to buy into this narrative of that things are a certain way or they can or should be a certain way.
And that stuff has already been proven too, which is nice. That's why you've seen the narrative changing. And even like we talk about collective consciousness, I don't know, it's very difficult for me to tell it, even if the media has a hold on that. I think the media's hold is dismal or diminishing because we've gotten to a place where, like even if you want to take like the economy, like in 1929 when the market crashed, and then we had the same setback like in 28.
Yeah.
08.
Oh,
Right?
wait, you're talking about the housing crash?
Yeah, 08. And I heard it was about the same percentage, but the way people got through it was completely different. Like there weren't soup lines and stuff like that. So as we learn to change the narrative and people get more control over what they like, how to change, and I think that's what it is what I hear about a lot of intellects, and they're fighting for the people to actually take responsibility onto themselves. What it is take responsibility onto your own narrative rather than buying into somebody else's narrative, because the media, when I watch it, they're selling me fear. Mm-hmm. All right? Now, they're not forcing me to buy it.
No.
I have to
We
purchase
choose.
it. Yeah, we choose, yeah. But if you're told this is the only thing you have to go by this, all of a sudden you buy into it. But then we realize, well, is there something else out there? And so all of a sudden, it's like we're all learning how to become screenplay writers, directors, the main actor. Coming to a realization, we are screenplay writers, we are directors, and we're the main actor in our own show. And then how do we deliberate, or how do we actually associate with other storylines? And that's what we're finding out right now. And when science comes in and starts to explain it, like Deepak Chopra really can see both sides clearly because he's actually studied both sides. I could come to a narrative based on my experiences and use words like quantum physics or biology and epigenetics and stuff like that. But the truth is, I don't really know the depths of those things. But I understand them at the ability in which I can understand them. But I do come to a realization that we're in a play. We're in a movie. And even if you understand a little bit about fractal geometry, fractal mathematics, and just fractals on their own, there's subsets of everything that happen this way. So when I'm watching a play and I get drawn into it, it's real. But all of a sudden you realize, oh, they're not on a real train. They're just moving themselves across the stage, and it looks like a train, but for a moment it felt like they were on a real train. And what is a real train anyway? It's just another set of pixels that we devise in this physical world, and we're here to play it out. And what is the purpose of life? I have no idea. But the experience I have, I'm actually learning to have more control over it, regardless of what's happening on the outside world, and I'm gaining perspective onto that. And someone like a Deepak Chopra is showing us, when you peel everything about, there is nothing other than the experience is the real, but the actual thing isn't real. And why? Because everything that we know to be physical isn't physical, and therefore it becomes fleeting. So what are we trying to hold on to?
Nothing.
Yeah,
Back to
well,
his
you
main
can't.
point. What is the universe?
Yeah.
Scientifically, nothing.
Yeah,
What
it's
is
just-
consciousness? Nothing.
It's energy is what it is, and energy, how do you grab it?
There's no matter. Yeah. There's no
Yeah.
material physical form. And
Yeah.
that's where, it's hard for us, at least from a Western perspective. We grow up thinking we're a physical body separate from everything around us, interacting with a world outside of us. And this could not be further from the truth. And this is where it takes a lot of peeling back these cultured, this cultured conditioning to see, oh my goodness, what is real?
Yeah.
What I determine is real is how I perceive and interact with real.
Yeah, but also too, like without the Eastern and Western culture, the Eastern culture would have nothing as well. So it's not about which culture is better. I'm like, it's kind of the yin and yang, the balance, this side and that side. Because if
Exactly.
you just had the spirit, what would be the physical experience? So, Deepak Chopra comes out of the East, and he's still talking about this stuff. So it's not like, it's a very interesting thing when we talk about East and West. It's like talking about yin and yang. You remove one, there isn't anything. You remove the crest of the wave or the trough of the wave, there is no wave. If there's no wave, what isn't there? There isn't life experience.
Yeah.
So, as we're putting these things together, what will happen is I think the theme of humanity will start to change into what I'm not really certain. But the thing I look for or look towards is more collaboration rather than competition. Competition will still exist, but only under the umbrella of collaboration. Like sports are competitive, but you can't have a sport and anyone would want to play the sport unless there was collaborative understanding what the rules and regulations are. And if anyone steps out, a yellow flag goes up and stops it. So we all agree upon that. And if someone does something wrong, no one's like, they might argue that it really didn't happen. But if someone deliberately does something wrong, even the person doesn't argue it. They bow down to it and they realize, okay, I tried to get away with it, but I couldn't. So in the physical world, there are these, outside of it, there are these laws and principles where if you try to step out of it, it won't work. You can maybe get away with it for a little bit. So there's empirical truth and then there's these half-truths, and how I perceive the world is a half-truth. But the ability for me to perceive it onto itself, the fundamental facts, that there is the empirical truth. And you talk about energy, it's empirical truth. Other empirical truths make it easier from the collective consciousness on this planet. There's gravity. So if I pick up something and I let go of it and I drop it, it will fall down in that straight line every time. If, anywhere, any location on the planet, if you leave the planet, then the gravitational pull changes based on the mass and the fabric of space-time. Mm-hmm. But as we start to understand it, but if wherever I am and I do that, it will move and drop. So I have a Newtonian understanding. So that would become the empirical truth of gravity. No one's going to argue that. But what I do with gravity, whether I take an elevator or stairs or I jump out the window, it's my expression in which I utilize gravity. Yeah. But no one's arguing and defending or debating gravity. You had Einstein come up with this new general relativity, was in 1915. Expelling upon and expanding upon Newtonian gravitational, how we explain it. But it was just a different understanding of it, but yet gravity still existed. The apple still fell from the tree, and Einstein's understanding of how light bends within the field of space-time due to gravity, but it still existed. Like if I dropped an apple, or like an apple fell off a tree, hit me in the head, just like it did Newton many years ago, that still exists. It hasn't changed just because Einstein let us look at gravity differently than, say, Newton.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. One thing that I kind of think about often that I took away from when Chopra was talking in this last video was, so he explains that we have these set of experiences, okay? We've got these set of experiences that we label, create a narrative around, and we tie them together, and we call that our life. We call that our experience. Well, what's so cool about this play, as Frank just called it, or this game, or this illusion that we call reality, is each one of us is having our own experience and creating our own narrative. And then those narratives and those experiences and stories tie in to everyone else that we interact with, and it creates a more impactful or a more real story of what I'm experiencing and what those other people are experiencing. So what I'm saying is, we're actively, whether we know this or not, as we experience something, that's helping another person have the experience they want to have. And so we all tie into each other's experiences. And this is why we don't meet anyone by accident. This is why I can tell you all, if you set a goal and you have that goal and then you allow it to unfold in front of you, the people and the experiences and the situations will come to you. They will attract to you. And it's because this is like the coolest game, the coolest play in the world, because each of us is having our own experience, and the experiences of others are needed and tied into our experience to make our reality even more real to us.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, and so now
I think about that all the time.
Yeah, and it's kind of, so like going back to the idea of principles, and that's kind of like what the Deepak Chopra's, Dr. Deepak Chopra of the worlds do, and he does it really great, is teaches the fundamental principles. So like an actor in a play, every human being can act, by the way. All right.
We all are.
Yeah, but I'm saying like any kid in first grade can get a role in a play. But the kids that use or learn to use the fundamental principles of acting and using their expression, some just naturally have it, some have to be taught, have to be pointed out. But there's certain principles as we use, we see we have a better flow through this experience that we call non-experiential. We seem to see things unfold and move, almost like the movie Matrix when everything was flying out. Was it
Keanu Reeves?
Yeah. Was it Neo, right?
Yeah, Neo.
Yeah, Neo.
Like neocortex.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, the bullets are coming and he just moved because he slowed it down, or did he speed up his time value to make it look like it slowed down? Einstein always thought if he could move it to speed of light, what would light look like? So he was speeding up from that vantage point. So we create the narrative in the way we want it through the principles that are solidified and already working. How we use it or misuse it will show us. But as I start to use these principles, my life and then others around me seemingly expand. When I misappropriate them and don't use them properly, it works just the same but against me in order for me to work them. So the universe is always working in our favor. But if we want to head west and I accidentally misunderstanding the forms of direction, I head east, all of a sudden I'm going to feel tension, I'm going to feel aggravated, and if I'm using GPS, it's going to constantly tell me to please make a U-turn as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. So whenever we're doing something wrong, we have these internal things before even the GPS. Like, I remember driving somewhere and it was Dumb and Dumber.
Hell yeah, I love that.
Remember when they sold the dog van or whatever?
Yeah, sheepdog.
Yeah, they sold that. They got the mini bike.
Yeah.
And so Harry
totally redeem yourself.
Harry, yeah, right, yeah, exactly. And I think no, Lloyd. Yeah. Lloyd was
Lloyd Christmas.
Yeah,
he's
and
the guy who gets it.
Yeah. So Lloyd was driving and Harry's on the back sleeping, and all of a sudden they're driving. And he missed a turn.
Oh yeah.
And they're like in the plains, like I forgot where they were, but like Montana. They weren't even anywhere near Colorado.
Yeah, near Aspen.
Yeah, and all of a sudden it's like, Harry wakes up. He goes, "Man, the Rockies aren't as rocky as they claim to be." But they realized they went in the wrong direction. But there was something there that indicated this wasn't right, even for two men that are considered to be dumb and dumber.
Yeah.
They figured it out, and they went the other, and they finally made their way to Aspen.
Mm-hmm.
So we all go through this. But now it's like, and he knew that the Rocky Mountains should not be a flat plain, because, even as dumb as he is, indicated. So there is something that's always moving us in a direction that lets us know, am I moving in a direction which I set out to do? And it doesn't mean that you have to make it there. That's not going to bring any more joy than the act of moving through it. But there's always something in the physical world, even though it's this made-up world, that's showing us that you're moving away from or towards something, and there's signs constantly. And these are the principles that are built into this mechanism. There really are, you know. And when everyone starts to understand these principles, life starts to get better. And but there was a point in my life where I didn't understand these principles at all. It was like a hit or miss.
Well, at that point, we're kind of playing a background character in other people's stories. When we don't understand these concepts, where we're at is we're under the impression that the world is happening to us. And so we kind of get sucked in as just a background character to those who understand they're in control and creating their story.
Yeah, with Death of a Salesman.
Yeah.
Instead of actually being the hero in the story, with a guy that just goes door to door and just never sees anything to work. But even then, we're still the main character in our show. We're not a background by any means. Yeah,
absolutely. But if we perceive ourselves as that, I'm not. That's for somebody, who's a better speaker than I am. That's for somebody who's smarter than I am. When we see ourselves as this role, we become that role.
Well, yeah, you act it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, no one can take away your main character. You always have been and you always will be the main character of your story. The question is, do you acknowledge it? Just like I forgot who it was said to that one news anchor, the only difference is I know I'm God. And you doubt it.
Yeah, but what I found interesting is when I do talk to people that have this narrative, like, this is good as it gets. And they don't, like, I remember one time bringing this concept, and they looked at me like I was like an alien. So I stopped. But what's interesting is, even in the interim of them telling their story, they were 100% okay with it. They weren't suffering. So I found that to be interesting because there are concepts and principles that are even far gone that I even understand right now. But because I'm starting to understand the principles right now and I'm working on it, I seem to be 99% of my day excited and happy. And 99 might be a stretch if you ask Karen, but it's up in the 90 percentile. Right?
It's in the 90%.
Let's talk to her. It might change. We talked about if you talked to her yesterday, it'd be a whole different story. But anyway, but maybe there are other principles that are in different levels that I don't understand. So I really understand, like, all of a sudden these people just seem like, this is good as it's going to get for me, but I'm okay with that. And they don't suffer from it as much as you think they would. But I think, oh my God, if I was there, I'd be suffering. But I'm like, but that's on me.
And that's us judging.
Yeah, and maybe they are suffering, but they don't seem to express it that way. So, and I used to be like, well, you need to start looking at it differently. I'm like, no, they don't.
That's exactly how I felt about multiple.
Yeah.
Frank, what you just described so well there is like, who am I to say that this homeless person, is not happy or that they need to live differently or anything like that? Well, see, that's the thing. We judge others so much that we describe our judgment as empathy.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, no, I'm being a good person. Of course they wouldn't want to feel that. We don't know that. And who are you to say that? Who are you to think that you know what is the best for every person out there? Oh, my goodness. When that clicked for me, I was like, gee, I've been judging so many people thinking like, oh, I'm empathetic on this. No, I'm looking down on people. I'm assuming somebody feels a certain way or assuming somebody wants what I want and all this. All of that is bullshit.
Yeah. I'll never look at homeless people ever again after seeing John Wick 3.
Yeah. Oh,
they were all the assassins.
Yeah,
like badasses. So when I see a homeless person, I'm like, hey, how you doing, guy? I'm your friend. Don't kill me.
I'm your friend.
Here's $1. Oh shit, here's $5.
But we stand on our soapboxes so much that we even have turned it into a thing where we've created a word that we've described as empathy, and that we look at it in a positive light. And it's like no. This is judgment. This is measurement. This is defining.
Yeah.
We need to get a hold of that and see what we're actually doing. And what we're actually doing is measuring and judging. And when we're in that role, we're in the world.
Yeah,
we're not of it.
Yeah, and we're doing that same thing. I do it to myself all the time, and that's why a lot of times if I the people you're closest to, you tend to do this more, where you let go or let loose. It might be just this momentary thing, and all of a sudden you state, "This is how it is." And then a moment later, you're like, "Yeah, scratch that." Like, well, which is it? I'm like, "Well, it's multitudes of dynamics." It's like, who's Sean Penn? Is he Jeff Spicoli, or is he the actor who's playing now? It's like, well, it's absurd. So I also understand, as people speak freely, it's only in that moment of their perspective of who they are. That's it. And it flees so quickly. Because Sean Penn probably forgot about Jeff Spicoli, even though it was one of his first major roles, to get on to the other roles and the multitudes of roles he's played.
Yeah, dramas, etc.
Well, everything, everything. So, and people get the concept what I'm talking about. So these moments of time when I say this and everyone's trying to hold it. So a lot of times, too, what I've noticed that people tend to do are not complaining as much, or complaining. So if I'm not complaining as much, when I do complain, it stands out. And all of a sudden, people hold on to that. But if I complained all the time and I'm like, hey, today's a good day, that would stand out. It's very interesting. So, but I also, too, I get this, I get somewhat defensive, where I'm like, hey, I said that one thing, but now I'm like, that's not who I am. They're like, well, it said who you are, and then I get defensive over it. I'm like, you're missing the narrative. But when I'm missing the narrative, I'm like, who am I to interfere with somebody else's narrative about me, right?
And that is exactly what it is. Somebody else's narrative about you.
I think that's why
nothing
people
to do with you.
Yeah, that's why the character in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest just kept his mouth shut.
Hell yeah.
He's like, I'm not going to say shit.
Well,
no one knows if I'm crazy or not.
Well, one thing I want to add to what I was just saying too, like, and you helped spark this, but when we think we're being empathetic for others, we're actually observing them in a role that we would not prefer them, trapping them, keeping them stuck in a spot. And I realize this, like with my family and with just friends and relationships in general. Like as soon as I feel bad for somebody, or which is judging someone or measuring someone, I'm keeping them trapped in that role.
Yeah, you're not keeping them trapped. If they're trapped, they're keeping themselves trapped.
Well, no, what I mean though is I can take that same picture and I can change it, and I can put that freedom, or put that a different spin on it to lessen the grip.
Yeah, you lessen the grip on your. So in other words,
my interpretation.
Yeah. So if my interpretation, life is going bad, and if you measure the frequency outputs of my feeling, it's actually waves. So you look at waves that move together, that flow together. It's called synchronicity. But if I have interfering waves, we feel it as what we call bad feelings and negative feelings. Anxiety is really like, oh my God. Where excitement is like, oh, it's the same speed of frequency, but the waves aren't, they're actually flowing together, but they're not canceling each other out. So think about yourself as an actor in a play or a movie. And the nemesis, if I'm a hero, and in order to be the hero, you have to have a nemesis. I don't feel bad for the nemesis. I want that actor to be the biggest prick or nemesis on the planet in order for me to look like the best hero. And at the end of the play of the movie, we are best friends. So this is why we should never feel bad about anyone, because they're doing their job to feed out what I'm doing it. So look at everything as a play or a movie. Can you imagine stopping like, hey, why is he acting this way? And the director's like, cut. Just focus on your part. And a lot of directors will do this. I remember watching the making of The Godfather. It was a series called The Offer. And Francis Ford Coppola wanted Al Pacino's playing Michael to be nervous in the scene where he goes into the restaurant. He was supposed to kill two guys. And that would be his introduction to the family. So he's walking, and Al Pacino was nervous already. So he's like, listen, let's come into the bathroom with me. And it's like, I'm going to put the gun behind this tank. It was like an old-fashioned tank where it was up above. It's going to be right here. You have nothing to worry about. So he calmed him down. But then he realizes when Al Pacino left, he goes, put it over on the other side 6 inches higher, because I want him to be nervous.
Yep.
I don't want him to be comfortable. Because this is a nervous thing. He has to act like he's nervous. He's never done this before. He's never shot people before. So the director messed with it, but also Al Pacino as the actor wasn't going to be like, cut, stop, where the hell's the gun? And then when you're watching this, when you go back and watch the movie, he's looking for it. You can tell he's like, where the is it? And then he finds it because it's not that big of a space. He just kept looking for it. But the director knew that by setting that setting, he put him in the exact act that he needed him to do to sell the role, and he did that. So we want to sell our role.
This is what our spirit guides do for us.
So they do. And so for me to tell somebody else, it would be like the actor stopping the scene. Hey, what's going on? The director's like, cut. Well, what's the problem? I don't like the way they're acting. I was like, well, don't worry about them. You act the way you do. You follow your lines, and you respond to them the way you feel you should respond to them. And then by the end of the movie, when you're finally cutting, it's Ed and everything else. We're sitting at the preview, at the premiere. You're like, oh, I get it. But if you kept stopping and everyone should be responding to the way you thought, like that is going to be the most boring movie in the world. So that's why looking at somebody else, we're just here, okay, how do I feed off this? And again, we learn this. Military guys learn this. How do they take aggression and take the narrative of diminishing the aggression? They work with it every day. They don't equal it. They could diminish it. But they don't stop the person like, hey, can you stop being aggressive? They might warn them, if you keep this up, it's not going to work on your behalf, but they know how to respond to it. So as we learn to respond to these principles, and the more we have understanding the formula principle, we don't necessarily need to be in every situation every moment in order to step into the situation every moment. The principles will guide you through every moment of every situation that you've never been in, so therefore you're prepared. These basic principles that govern an understanding that one of them is we have control over how we feel regardless of the situation, circumstance. If you don't believe that, you're not going to utilize the principle well. You're just not going to go to the place where it is. If you believe you can't get to San Diego, you don't. But it doesn't mean San Diego does not exist. And that's kind of these principles that Dr. Deepak Chopra is talking about. We understand this. We make this fake world, the reality feeling world, we make it more excitable and excitement and more worth living rather than this is difficult. It's like, no. It's only difficult because we misunderstand it. But there's always going to be challenges. That's the fun of it. Like if, how old did you have to stop playing tic-tac-toe before you realized you can't win? You had to move on to chess, then to checkers, then to chess. Because there comes a point where these games, once you master them, there's no winning. But then there's always another game that's higher. There really is, It took me
and we're playing that highest game.
Yeah, we're beyond playing tic-tac-toe, It's, come on.
No.
At least. But at the same time, I don't believe, again, this is my narrative, I don't believe we should be further along than where we are. I wouldn't be able to make that statement because I don't know if we are. I've heard people make that statement. Maybe they're right, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to diminish myself because that's one of the principles. If I diminish myself, I don't get anywhere.
I don't know is probably the most honest answer that we can all give ourselves for everything.
Jeff Spicoli said that.
See,
why are you always
the
like,
wise words.
I don't know. And that's the hand wrote on the I don't know. Let's examine this.
I love that.
Mr. Hand, will I pass history? Mr. Spicoli, I don't know. And then he's like, dick.
But it's the truth. None of us know. We don't know if something's, gonna work out. We don't know. We want to know, and we want to take out all the stops that eliminate, anything other than that. But we really don't know.
So, Mike, when you don't know, what do you do?
Well, we have no choice but to let go.
Or you examine.
Yeah.
If I don't know what's in the cave, but I'm drawn to it, I go in the cave.
And begin to experience.
And then I'll know what's in the cave, but then what's at the other side of the cave, I don't know. And with the I don't know, it leads me into new knowings. But I don't know it all. I know what I've experienced, and even what I experience is fleeting. So holding on to that knowing, it doesn't really serve me any well. Like, again, Sean Penn holding on to knowing of how to act like Jeff Spicoli didn't help him in Sam. Mm-hmm. It didn't help him in Sam. There was probably no correlation between the characters of Jeff Spicoli and the role he played in Sam. I believe the name of the movie was Sam. Mm-hmm. I hope I didn't get that wrong, but you get the idea. So he had to let go of the whole way he acted as Jess Piccoli in order to fulfill this other role. But it didn't mean Jess Piccoli wrong. It's just different. But the old, unless I'm doing reruns or remakes, and even, the time Sylvester Stallone got to Rocky 20, how many Rockies are there?
Seriously.
He was slightly different than he was. Like, he wasn't fighting anymore.
And this is each and every one of us in our
Yeah.
lives. This is what we're experiencing. Are you at home the same person you were in high school? No, you weren't. Are you the same person you were in elementary school? Are you we change roles, identities all the time. Are you the same person you are before or after you had children? No.
The sad thing, it hasn't changed much since junior high school for me, but
Frank,
mentally,
you changed a shitload.
Mentally, I don't know. Sometimes I still act like a 13-year-old child. But hey,
there's no way that we can't be. We are ever evolving, and that's what this experience is.
Yeah.
And let's jump into our next clip.
Okay,
we'll show you. The next one flows with this.
Yeah.
Having the deeper understanding that the context, the meanings, the relationships, and the stories that we call karma, and we're attached to them, which recycle as almost a cognitive and perceptual constraint or prison or lens or limitation or belief. Karma is always considered a bondage. And why is it considered a bondage? It limits our possibilities for creativity, limits our possibilities for imagination, limits our possibilities for creating a new reality, both of the body and of the physical world. So karma is nothing but the recycling of the conditioned mind, which we've said so many times. Sensations, images, and feelings and thoughts interpreted in the same way is karma. So karma is the past. It's the history of the past, determines the situations, circumstances, events of the present, but how we interpret them is a function of a deeper reality. So what Jesus is teaching here is very important, okay? So when you detach means simply, then we take the stand as witnessing awareness. I am the witnessing awareness in which sensations, sense perceptions, images, feelings, thoughts come and go. And the world and the body are a reflection of that. A reflection of that. Reflection doesn't mean that they are caused by that. Just like a mirror doesn't actually do anything but reflect what's happening, so too, the mirror of awareness, when you take a stand, I'm witnessing awareness, then it reflects your particular state of consciousness, which you experience as sensations, sense perceptions, images, feelings, and thoughts, and how you interpret it, the context, the meaning, the relationships, the story. That's all karma. It's the past, the prison of the known.
Yeah, I like what he says about karma.
Well, it's so well said, because at least this is how I interpreted where Chopra's at with this. So karma is our experiences that we're having, but on a deeper level, it's how we're interpreting the experience. So we're going to continue to experience, this is what karma is, we're going to continue to experience things until we grow from it, until we understand it, until we learn from it. And so where he's at with this is, okay, these situations will continue to be put in front of you until you create a new neural pathway, a new way of understanding the situation that's been presented. So essentially, if you think you're constantly thinking that bad things are going to happen, etc., and all this, then bad situations, or what you interpret as bad situations, get presented in front of you until you're able to mentally state and mentally know in your being that how I'm interpreting these situations is the reason I'm experiencing the situations in the way that I am. So ultimately, until I create a new way to think about a situation, I'm going to forever be trapped to that karmic feeling or that pull or that initial, emotion or feeling, etc. So you come to this place where you see that you do not have to feel a certain way just because that's how you have felt in the past. And there is a new possibility and a new way to experience any given situation. And this is how you grow from karma rather than staying trapped in karma.
Yeah. And being he mentioned Jesus, there's always I've always heard this quote, and I don't know where it came from, but with Buddha came karma, with Christ came grace. Mm-hmm. And so karma, like people, what's karma? Like, well, he mentioned the mirror. If I look in the mirror and my hair is standing up in a way I don't like it to stand up, and I close my eyes and open it up, it's still there, I'm going to get the same response because karma is just a reflection back of what I'm doing. But if I close my eyes and pat my hair down, open it up, it's changed. That's the grace. The grace is going within and changing the narrative, period. Mm-hmm. So just like, Sean Penn, when he was fulfilling the role of Jeff Spicoli through the whole theme of the movie, he had to stay within that karmic field of Jeff Spicoli. Mm-hmm. But once that movie was over, he let it go. Mm-hmm. He dropped it. He was no longer Jeff Spicoli, the character. But in order to
Nor was he limited to that character in all his other films. He's not just that character.
But to some degree, you want to limit yourself in the field of karma to fully develop anything you want to learn from it, really to expand upon it. And then each individual will know when to step off the field, so to speak. So when I step on a field, say a football field, to play the game, there are certain rules and regulations pertaining to football. But the second I step off the field, those rules and regulations will pertain. I'll have a referee throwing a flag around because I bumped into somebody. It's everyday life. I might have to say, excuse me, but and my narrative, I can go anywhere. I'm not confined to 100 by 50 field and certain rules. So karma is the limitation of the field in which we can have the ultimate experience of unlimited experiences. But even in that point, we have to let go of that to go to another field of that type of stuff. So karma isn't bad, but know that beyond the karma of playing football, you can play something else or go on and do something else. But in that field, that's where it exists.
And in the video, he said the phrase, karma is the recycling of the conditioned mind. And I thought that was great because that's the truth. So if I wake up each day and I say, oh, God, it's Monday again. This is going to be another shitty week. I'm tired. I don't want to go to work. I know what's going to happen. And then as my day unfolds, it sucks. It is kind of crappy. I'm not enjoying it. I'm having tough situations happen, etc. That's a normal cycle that a lot of us live in. And we call it normal. We just say, oh, that just kind of sucks. This is normal for me. My life isn't that exciting. No, what you're experiencing is karma. It's a recycled series of your conditioned, responses and how you perceive the world. And so you continue to experience the world in that way until you free yourself of that karma. How do you free yourself of that karma and those recycled conditioned experiences? Through grace, creation of new. And so we create, no, wait, today doesn't need to be the worst day ever. In fact, I feel pretty good that, this is going to be my week. Well, as soon as you change that narrative, now the universe conspires to bring you a new experience, a freeing from that karma, that conditioned recycle thought process. You are now, in a scientific way of saying it, you are now creating a new neural pathway. Your neural pathways before were feeding you, oh, it's going to be a crappy week. It always is on Monday. You hate your job. You hate your situation at home. You hate your friends, whatever. And you continue to experience more of that. As soon as you free yourself of karma, what you are actually doing, scientifically speaking, is you have created a new neural pathway for information to now flow. So I don't need to interpret reality as this. I'm going to allow myself to experience and interpret it from this way. And that is letting go and clearing of the karma.
Yeah. Now, from a pragmatic, fundamental way, people are like, well, how do you do that? Because it's so easy to say, well, think of it differently. What I've learned to do and I share with other people is when you're looking at your life and say this sucks, ask yourself, why does it suck? And you'll come up with a narrative. And a narrative, because I don't like this job. Again, ask yourself another question. Why don't you like the job? Another narrative will come up. You keep asking the question why. I usually get to 4 or 5 whys where I realize I'm the one creating this narrative. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh my God. And then all of a sudden, if you
I remember you telling me that years ago, and that works.
Yeah, if you find one little thing that you like about your day and focus on that, all of a sudden the garden starts to grow brilliantly. And yeah, you might find yourself in a new job, or you might find yourself in charge of the job that you were in. Some external thing will change eventually. But if you do not change, like in other words, if I'm looking in the mirror and I don't like my hair, I'm like, well, why don't I like my hair? It's sticking up. Well, why is it bothered sticking up? You know, Billy Idol got away with it, right?
Hell yeah.
You start to use narratives that are more suitable for your preferential rather than against you. And all of a sudden you start seeing, yeah, you might pat the hair down eventually and get it flat, but where did these narratives come from? And they're not working for me.
Internally. This is where we realize we're our own worst enemies.
Yeah, because we purchase them from somebody else. But so simple things to do is just keep asking yourself why, and you eventually get to a point where you're almost on your knees to where you don't know why. Well, if you don't know why, let's then choose a narrative that will work, and all of a sudden, my hair doesn't look that bad. If I just scoot over this way, now you realize when I say it doesn't look that bad, the karmic aspect of not liking my hair shifts and changes. And then I might realize, well, the mirror isn't creating it. The mirror is reflecting back what I've allowed it. And then I can change it. I'm like, wow, I can change the way I look in the mirror, just by shifting everything. And I'm like, yeah, you can do that. But how far do you want to keep changing it? Like, what's the purpose here? Again, I could just slightly shift something, go into something else. So in order to explore something like a cave, you must be in the cave. Cave is limited, but who cares? But knowing there's an exit and an entrance in the cave is what allows me to stay in this limited place. So I want the karmic aspect in the physical world anyway, but knowing I could drop it any time with grace to move on to some other karmic aspect. If I step off the football field, that's one game. If I step into the world of business, that's another game. They're all narratives. They're all limited based on what our being is, but we came here in the physical world to have a limited field of existence, experience, to have an unlimited experience of that very thing. Mm-hmm. Again,
in fact, we need a limited number of
it appears that way, yeah,
in order to have infinite experiences.
We only need in the English language we narrow down to 26 letters in order to have infinite amount of words to speak, 12 notes in music in order to have infinite amount of music. So, well, I don't know. What would it look like with infinite amount of notes? Mm-hmm. I don't even know that concept. I don't even know where to start the song. If there was infinite amount of letters in the alphabet changing, where would the words start? How would we get to a place of communication? I don't know. But right now, the limitation, like the greatest authors that I've liked, who can take what's his name? Ernest Hemingway would always challenge his colleagues in order to tell a story in like less than 10 words. Mm-hmm. Like anyone could tell a story in 300 pages, but 10 words, and I think the story said, baby shoes for sale, never been worn. And I remember Karen told me this, mm-hmm. This is Karen's field of literature and stuff. And I remember the first time she told me that, she's like, isn't that a sad story? And I'm like, why is it sad? She's like, because obviously the child died. And I'm thinking, well, in his day, they didn't know the birth of the child. So maybe the shoes are pink and they came out as a boy. Mm-hmm. So they sold them. They were never worn because why would they stick pink shoes on a boy? Mm-hmm. Hemingway left the narrative open to your interpretation by shortening the distance of it. He didn't get into detail. He could have said, but it would take long 10 words. When you can do that, everything becomes your own input. It wasn't mean Karen was wrong for thinking that way, nor was I wrong. It was different. Mm-hmm. But that's the brilliance of narrowing the field, making a very limited understanding, and then there it becomes so infinite. Because then we could have sat there all day and explained the different narrative to why the shoes were never worn. But it didn't just mean the baby died, you know. Maybe the baby's feet were, maybe the baby's feet were too big, too small, boy or girl, and they didn't want to do this, and maybe someone bought the shoes and they don't like the person. There's so many narratives to why it wasn't worn, and we could go all day long if we tried. We know this, but yet it was a very limited story in the amount of words and syllables that we used in it, and that's the brilliance. It seems like that's the theme of life in which we are right now. Is create a limitation. We see it in games. Like all games are very limited. You go from tennis, then you go from ping pong, right? It's like the same type of thing, but one's more limited, right? But it just seems we like to put ourselves in limitations. And people are like, oh, I'm limited. And I'm like, you aren't limited. The field that you presented is limited. You are as a being, not me, Frank Daly. But the being I am is unlimited, but my unlimited has to see what it can do in this limited world in order to express myself unlimitless. And that's how I start looking. I'm like, wow, okay, that's cool. But I'm still recognizing, like I don't want to run onto a football field and just scream out, I win. Like, based on what narrative? I want to follow the narrative that everyone else is following, but I want to be able to, how'd you do that? I'm like, well, I looked at it differently. And then when I tell people I looked at it differently, they can see what I'm saying because I didn't break apart the field. I kept the field exactly the way it was, but they didn't look at, like when I told Karen, well, maybe it was a boy. I never looked at it that way. But it wasn't completely out in left field for her. But she kept that narrative, the baby died. Like, no, it was a boy and the shoes were pink. Because it didn't tell you what color the shoes were. She said, oh. And I'm like, well, the feet could have been too big, too small. They could have been, wow. And that helps expand us. But I don't have to change the story. I can keep the story the same. And that's the brilliance of grace. Grace allows us to change the narrative, not necessarily the framework of the story.
I love that.
Yeah.
That leads us well into the next video.
The body is a dream, the mind is a dream, the world is a dream. As the Buddha said, this lifetime of ours is transient as autumn clouds. To watch the birth and death of beings is like looking at the movements of a dance. A lifetime is like a flash of lightning in the sky, rushing by like a torrent down a steep mountain. But me, the witnessing awareness, is eternally watching the dream. And soon I begin to watch that which is watching. I become the witness of the witness. And the witness is silent, non-judgmental, watching. And there is fullness of experience even as the experience arises and subsides. And then there are choices that can be made in the eternal now that can upgrade the dream. So all there is the witnessing awareness, which slowly drops into the witness of the witness, and ultimately the witness also drops, and all that's left is eternal being.
Well said.
That's what we're describing, is witnessing this experience.
Yeah.
Allowing ourselves to observe as not the actor. We don't only need to experience the emotion. We don't only need to act as if what's happening to us is the sole and final outcome. It's putting space between the experience and the experiencer.
Yeah. And that's just it. We don't have to change. we just change the narrative and how we look at it. And that's one of the principles he's talking about. So the circumstance, the situation is happening. We're not denying that. We're not denying the 10 words that or less that Hemingway used to tell the story. We're not denying that. But what we're doing is we're using our infinite intelligence to change the meaning of it.
And you can witness yourself changing the meaning.
Yeah, it's amazing.
You know, and that's when you start to see how powerful you are. That's when you start to realize, oh my gosh, like there's so many dimensions to this being. I am witnessing myself change the narrative, and as I'm changing the narrative, I begin to experience it differently. Now you're experiencing your whole reality from a number of different ways, and you realize, oh my God, I've been trapped thinking that I'm just this person with this world happening to me, and there's nothing I can do. No, in fact, I can actively use my will, use my free will to begin to experience a situation differently.
And know this, when you're living your life and you're getting to the point where, like, I use this as an analogy, you're learning to balance in the walk, and at first you start out on the sidewalk, which is like a width of like 2 feet or greater, depending on where you live. Mm-hmm. And then when you want to really test your skill when you're still young, you go onto a curb, which is usually 4 inches, maybe 6 inches. And then you take it to the next level. You go to a balance beam, which is a little bit narrower than a curb, but also, too, you're dealing with height, you know. And then from there, you go to a tightrope. We do this on purpose because you create a more narrative. So, again, talking about the Hemingway thing, you go from having a 300-page novel, a 500-page novel, however you want to look at it, down to one story that's written in 10 words or less. As we get greater at this, we want to narrow the field in which we play the game, but then create the infinite ability. Because it's so much easier to create a narrative in something that's bigger, wider, more added to it. It's easier to walk on a sidewalk. We know that. Mm-hmm. It's easier to walk on a curb compared to a balance beam. It's easier to walk on a balance beam than a tightrope. But we want to keep getting to that next level in order to really find out how infinite we really are. So what's happening is, if you're trying to just get better on the balance beam, you're going to be forced. And when you get to the place where you're really good on the balance beam, you're going to naturally find yourself the next day on a tightrope. Like, what's going on? I'm like, hey, you said the same thing when the day before you were on the curb. Keep going. If you really want to know how infinite powerful you are, the universe will show you a tightrope the next day. And that's really how it is. And know this, you're equipped for it. You might fall off, you might do this, but you always set the premise. Like, the first day you walk on tightrope, you don't string it across the Grand Canyon. Did you ever see that guy that did that?
Dude, I love that.
Like 90-mile-an-hour winds.
They did the buildings, too.
Yeah. So you don't start out going across the Grand Canyon. Like, that's a whole different level. But prior to the person doing that, they probably did it from tree to tree in their backyard, and they were probably, a certain amount of feet off the ground, so if they did fall, they weren't going to die. But they kept making the field smaller and smaller because they want to see how infinite they were. And that's really, it's a natural byproduct of human. And if you go with it, it's interesting. It's a principle. But if you fight it and try to stay on the sidewalk, nothing is gained. That's where boredom sets in.
Well, I also want to say fighting it is you trying to understand it. The more I try to analytically left brain try to understand something, the more I screw it up or the less I understand it. It's like you're fighting to get on the information. So around our bodies, what we can't see, because our eyes only picks up, a range of light, there's all this frequency and information around Frank and I right now. And as we can get more quiet, as we can get more quiet and inside, and the more we can get on the level of that information, that's how we find our answers. It's actually getting quiet and getting on the level of the frequency. This is, great, like Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla. People always talked about how these ideas came to them. Well, it's not like they came to them individually, their specific person, their ego, identity, etc. No, they allowed themselves the space with the focus for those answers to find them and attract those answers and get on that same wavelength. So the information, the answers to everything is all around us. It's, can we get quiet enough and allow ourselves to experience that answer?
Yeah. If you want to know what the rooftop of your building looks like, you must go to the rooftop, period. So when you go there, you are one with the rooftop, and now you know what the experience is. And knowing that we're infinite, you can get there, and you move along the linear perspective of how we tell life in that. So it will be the next logical answer. But if you don't think you could do something, for one, it becomes a false narrative. But where it becomes problematic and where we kind of falter here is if I see someone walk across the Grand Canyon on a tightrope, I'm like, I think that's amazing, but I can't do that. Well, it's because I don't want to do that. It's not part of my narrative. So all of a sudden, I diminish my value because now all of a sudden I have to do that in order to get somewhere. I'm like, no, just be excited for the fact that this person spent their whole being, focusing as they walked across that thing. How can I take that infinite power and do it for me? Just having dinner with a loved one. Like, it doesn't have to be life-threatening. It could be writing a book. It could be just a day at work. Taking that narrative of infinite and just sit there. Like, if people go to work and you're aggravated, I'm like, go to work and try to have no response to anything. Just observe like you're watching a movie. Like, you're going to but don't get pulled into it. That can change your life.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be this great feat in which the world thinks is great feat. It really doesn't. Actually, it's all great.
That's what we create.
Yeah.
That's the idea that, this conditioned sense of thought that we must become something other than what we have and always have been.
Yeah, because we're always comparing ourselves.
Yeah, there's nothing we need to become.
Yeah, how come no one compares himself to the sun or the moon? Right?
They just are.
Yeah, you'd be a fireball.
Mm-hmm.
But, so, hope you guys liked our interpretation or our explanation of Deepak Chopra. Again, he's one of these people, like most people we do. We could probably spend a lifetime just talking about him. But on that being said, you can go check out a lot of content. He's still, he does a lot of posts, almost weekly.
Yeah.
I think I see him, you tell he's at a hotel somewhere.
Yeah,
and
he's always posting content.
Yeah, posting content. So he's really, so directly to the source and see what you think about him. I've really listened to him for many, many years. And every time I listen to him, I pick something up new. Never ends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you guys like what you heard today, feel free to subscribe to the channel below. If there's any specific, maybe spiritual teacher, person, etc., that you would like to see covered, shoot us an email, leave us a comment. We love getting back to you guys. We'll see you guys next week.
All right. Peace out.